If you look at the Bible, every other character in the Bible has flaws. They have failures. They blew it a lot. But Joseph is one of those guys who just seemed like he did it right, and he did it right all the time. And to be honest with you, measuring up to something like that isn't good. But the truth of it is, our title today is Evil Intent Turns to God's Will. Now Joseph, like I said, was a pretty good young man. He was his dad's favorite, which, by the way, in any kind of family environment, when you have favorites, you all know how that works out. It doesn't. People get upset. And Joseph's brothers, at least 10 of them, were not real happy with their brother. And to be honest with you, when you look at the preamp of what was going on, it's not surprising there was some dysfunctionality in this family. They were not set up to win. They were set up to fail. We're going to start our scripture in Genesis 37, 18 through 28. And what's happened here is the boys are off minding the flocks, and they're taking a little longer than they should, probably because they're goofing off. So Dad sends Joseph out to find him. And guess what? The brothers see an option. So Genesis 37, 18 through 28 says, they saw him from afar, and before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And then all will say, the fierce animal devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. But when Reuben heard this, he rescued him from out of their hands, said, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into one of the pits here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, in that he might rescue him from their hands and restore him to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, he stripped him down in his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore. And he took him and threw him in a pit. And the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, and their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. When the Midianite traders passed by, they drew up Joseph, lifted him up, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Now, yeah, like I said, this is a dysfunctional family. Things are not going well. Jacob, their father, bears some blame in this because he was very fond of Joseph, and he did dote on him. He let him get away with a lot of things that the other boys would not have. But no matter what, it's not something that is acceptable what they did. When Joseph was a young man, he had a dream that said, your brothers and your father will bow down to you one day. You will be a great ruler. Now, for a very young man, probably pre-trained when he got this, that's an overwhelming dream, a vision. And it came from God, so Joseph had no doubt it was going to be true. But telling your brothers that they are going to bow down and serve you at some point in the future is not a good way to make family relations better. But, on the other hand, selling your brothers and sisters is not acceptable either. And I hope that none of you have considered doing that. Because I'm here to tell you, the Bible does say that was wrong. So, if you're thinking about it, put that out. They wanted to eliminate Joseph, thinking that if he was out of the picture, Dad might be a little bit more easy on them, if you will. It's an interesting family. It's more interesting because these 12 sons of Jacob become the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is the beginning of the nation of Israel in these 12 sons. So even from the beginning, they had their flaws. And I think we have to acknowledge that even in great leaders, many flaws exist. And I think it's hard sometimes because we want that to not be the case. We would prefer that things go differently. But because of man's evil intent, sometimes men do bad things. We do things we shouldn't. We don't see things through the proper perspective that God would prepare for us. It sort of reminds me that there were two children on Mother's Day who went up to mom, who was still in bed, and says, "You stay in bed, we're going to cook breakfast." She thought, this is great. So she stood there and she smelled the bacon drying and all of this. After a great deal of time, she's like, they should be coming up for me here shortly, or bringing it up for me. And when she finally did decide that she'd go downstairs to see, they found them all eating their breakfast and said, "Surprise, Mom, we decided to cook our own breakfast today." Now, we oftentimes are that way. We do things for ourselves instead of for somebody else. It's all about our benefit, not theirs. It is, unfortunately, a human nature. The old saying, "You look out for number one first," still is. And that does, unfortunately, lead to some evil. It was certainly there with the brothers of Joseph when they threw him in the pit and sold him. And I guess if our story ended there, you just have a story of how rotten brothers can be to a brother, and it would be a pretty sad story. But it does not end there. You have to fast forward some 22 years. There's a severe famine going on. Joseph is now the number 2 man under Pharaoh in Egypt. Now that's a position that Pharaoh was considered a god. So to be his number 2 puts you one step below God in the Egyptians' eyes. Joseph, who started out as a hated brother, who literally did not have anything but God's vision in store for him, led Israel, or Egypt at the time. He literally was there when the world needed him. Now fast forward 17 years later, the famine is getting severe. And guess what? The brothers have to go to Egypt because they're starving. Now, if you're Joseph, you spend a lot of time going, what in the world is going on? My brothers sold me into slavery. I was sold to Potiphar, and I was his slave. I worked very, very hard for Potiphar. I did everything right. I did all the good things. And then his wife makes a pass at me, and then accuses me, and I end up in prison. For a man destined to be a leader, Joseph's life seems to be going in all the wrong directions. And to be honest with you, it is difficult sometimes in life to see God working in your life. Very often, like Joseph sitting in prison, going, well, God, I don't see how this makes me put in place to be a leader. I don't see how this is going to put me in a position. So far, everything in my life has gone bad. From my brother selling me, to becoming a slave, to being falsely accused, and now suddenly here I am in prison. And he spent about 17 years later, or 22 years, waiting for the time for him to become the number 2 man of Egypt. 22 years of waiting for God to answer a vision. That's a long time. And it's interesting because the timing is perfect. 2 of Pharaoh's people are in prison and meet Joseph and have dreams. One is convicted and killed. The other is restored back to his job. So when Pharaoh turns up and says, I got a weird dream and I need somebody to interpret it, and no one can do it, the cupbearer goes, I remember this guy, and he interpreted my dream. So he connects with Pharaoh. And a prisoner, a young boy prisoner, who's had nothing but trouble his whole life, now is the number 2 man of Egypt. And when his brothers come begging for food, he's in a position to do something about it. Now, I don't suspect that most of you, if you put yourself in Joseph's case, don't have a little bit of, here's payback time. The world has that famous word called karma. Yeah, here's my chance. You guys want to sell me? Guess what? You're in trouble. But that's not what he does. He forgives them. He sets up, he gives them food. He takes them into Egypt. He gives them some of the best grazing ground there is in Egypt. And he takes care of his brothers. Now this is messing with his brothers' heads, obviously. Because they kind of know what they deserve. They kind of know what they did. In fact, they are very much aware of just how guilty they are. And here's Joseph being nice to them. But about 17 years into this life of Egypt, Jacob dies, their father. And the 10 boys go, we think that probably the only reason Joseph was nice to us is because of Dad. We think that probably now that Dad's gone, we're going to get what we got deserved coming. They know they deserve it. So they decide to make up a story. And they go to Joseph with this story. And we catch that in Genesis 15, verses 17 through 21. And the story they said was, they're telling him that Dad said this. And it says, say to Joseph, please forgive the transgressions of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of your servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. And his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about the many people that should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph could have done anything at this point. He could have had them killed. He could have sold them into slavery like they did him. But he chose to forgive them. And I think what Joseph understood was he saw the bigger picture. Had they not sold him into slavery, he would not have been in Egypt. Had he not been wrongly accused of assaulting Potiphar's wife, he would not have been in prison. He would not have met Pharaoh's servants and then been referred to Pharaoh. All these things had to come together. They all worked for a purpose. They all made something different. But going through the years, the decades that this took place, Joseph had to question, had to wonder exactly what is going on here. What is God doing in this? And I'm here to tell you, when you look through your life from a human perspective, God oftentimes looks like he's doing something wrong. He has had to have made a mistake, because the mess that I'm in cannot be God's plan. It certainly doesn't make any sense. Joseph's case was very much that way. I've been there myself, and I'm certain you've all been there too. What are you thinking, God? Why are you allowing this? Which brings me to, I have to be careful when I say this, because if somebody is listening to me often, they're going to go, Rick, you said that's your favorite verse, but 2 weeks ago this was a favorite verse, and this is a favorite. I have a ton of favorite verses. If anybody was to say, what's your most favorite verse, I have to say, what hour of the day is it? And what am I going through? Because given any given day, one verse is going to speak loudly to me. But this Romans 8:28 is perhaps, if I have a top 5 verses, it is definitely in the top 5. Romans 8:28 says, and we know for those who love God, all things work together for the good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Romans said all things work together for the good. Not some of them, not just a few of them. All things work together for my good. That means the really super bad day that I'm having is part of God's will. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me to explain it to you. There are days when I look at it and I go, Lord, what are you doing? No doubt, just like Joseph did, sitting in prison, wondering how this could take me to a leadership role. It makes no sense. It is not logical. But what I can tell you from looking at Scripture, from looking at people like Joseph, Romans 8:28 is a verse you can write down, you can claim, and you can say, if I am a Christian, all things will work to my good. And no, it is a fact. There is no if or maybe or possibly. God says all things will work to the good. I have lived a very weird life, to put it mildly. And growing up, when I was an abused child, living in an abusive home, I can honestly say there were days I screamed at God going, why? Why are you allowing this? What is the purpose? What is the reason for it? At almost age 65 today, I can show you, looking back on my life and say, those experiences, while they were terrible, while they were destructive, have also built me up, made me stronger, and made me able to minister in situations that other people cannot. I know what it's like to be in an environment like that. And sometimes you have to speak with some authority when you're talking to someone that is in that environment before they're going to respect and say, yes, we have a similar background. We have a similar background. You understand what I feel right now. God has a reason for everything. He does not cause the evil. God certainly did not tell Joseph's brothers, hey, here's a great idea. Let's sell your brother. He did not do that. That was evil within their own hearts, spawned by Satan. But what God did do was say, well, the evil that you designed, as Joseph so eloquently put it, what you designed for evil, God meant for good. God took the bad and he made it something wonderful. It reminds me of the story of a guy that was running the Boston Marathon for the first time. And he had just finished and he was hobbling away and he was in pain. And the grizzled old marathoner looked at him and said, the good news is you're going to feel better today than you do tomorrow. It's going to get worse. And he's like, oh, great. And then he paused and says, but the really bad news is in about 3 days, you're going to think you had fun today. And I think it's a lot like running a marathon. When we're in the pain, when we're in the suffering, this doesn't look much like fun. It certainly doesn't look like God has control. But given time, given the ability to look back and see God's plan and work, you see God saying, yes, I did have a plan. I do have a way. Joseph had a dream as a young boy. In between that dream, he spent a lot of time in pain and suffering. But if he had not gone through all of that pain and suffering, he would not have been where he was. And literally, Joseph single-handedly, by the way that he interpreted that dream and managed the affairs of Egypt, saved millions of lives. is not hard to see God's hand in this situation thousands of years later. But I assure you, it was certainly hard to see sitting in a prison cell, questioning God and asking, why am I here? What purpose does this serve in making me a great leader? As Christians, we too often read Romans 8:28 and say, yeah, all things work together for the good, except right now it sucks. My life really sucks. It just is not going the way I want it. And if I'm honest, my human nature focuses on the bad rather than the good. And I don't keep sight of the fact that says He's got this. He can handle whatever I'm dealing with, and He's not only going to handle it, He's going to make this negative situation something I can enjoy, something that will bless me and bless others. There's a story of a young kid who was working for a local drugstore, and owner had to leave, and he just said, if the phone rings, answer it. So the phone did eventually ring, and the person on the phone asked him, this young clerk, says, do you have streptomycin and actromycin? The clerk scratched his head and says, ma'am, when I said hello, I told you everything I know. We can be a lot like the clerk. We don't know what's going on, and we don't know what's the next step. We don't know why and how we should live. And it seems like occasionally that God has completely lost control of our lives. You will clearly see the evil intent that's focused against you. But rest assured, God sees it too. And He's already made a plan to take that evil intent to benefit you and to benefit others. God didn't just do that for Joseph. Romans 8:28 does not apply to just Joseph, the folks in the Old Testament, and the folks in the New Testament. Romans 8:28 applies to you and me if we are Christians. No matter what you face, no matter what you deal with in life, God has control. He will take whatever you face, whatever comes your way, and He will bring it to something positive. Don't ask me how. If you pull me off the side and tell me your story and say, now explain to me how God's going to make this good, I can't do that. Because I'm just a human being like you are, looking at it from a human perspective. But I can see it from the Bible. I can see it in my own life. I can see it in the lives of thousands of Christians who have taken terrible, rotten things in their life and seen God transform that. In fact, some of the most tragic stories in the world are from Christians who God used their broken and transformed lives to speak the good news of love and healing. I so often speak against anger and unforgiveness because it was one of my battles. I battled with anger, I battled with unforgiveness for many, many years. And I somewhat proudly bring that to you and tell you that because I know I'm not the only one that battles those things. I know there are plenty of people that still have a lot of anger in their lives, a lot of unforgiveness. And I can tell you that the times that I held on to that, justified. I mean, I hated my father. I'll be honest with you. I hated him. There was a point in my life where, unfortunately, as a young Christian or before I was a Christian, where if I'd had the opportunity to do harm to him, I would have. I'm here to tell you that attitude was destroying me as well as destroying my relationship with him. What I can tell you now, from seeing the other side, from God taking a very bad situation, is that Romans 8:28 does apply. All things work together for the good of the Lord. I can preach forgiveness. I can preach against hatred. because I see the destructive nature it did in my life. I can see the harm it did to me. So when I speak to you and say, it's not a healthy thing for you to do, you can take that to the bank, because I've been there, done that. God has taken a very bad, dark period of my life, and he's made it a wonderful thing. He's made it good news. My friend, you today may face dark, hard times. And I am here to tell you, you will face harder times yet to come. We live in a world that is going downhill fast. And I've looked at the end of the book, and Revelation and Daniel all tell me it's going to get worse. If you think things are bad, I'm sad to tell you, it's going to get worse. Now that could be discouraging, except that, like I said, while that is true, Romans 8:28 still is even more true. No matter how bad your life gets, no matter how much you struggle, God has got control. And he can take whatever you face, whatever challenges you, and make it a positive in your life. Make it a blessing. Today, I can tell you, there are plenty of people that have evil intent against us because we're Christians. Some of us because of the color of our skin. There are people who have evil intent against us for many, many reasons. But do not fear. Because God can take that intent and make it into a blessing. Not just for you, but even for the people who have the evil intent. Imagine being those 10 brothers in Egypt, relying on the brother that you sold into slavery, eating bread that you would not have had it not been for him. You received a blessing from the man you wished to kill. Your life and your children's lives were dependent on someone that 20 years sooner you would have put a knife into and killed. Even the folks who have evil intent may be blessed from God by you if you allow God that ability in your life. You see, my friends, Romans 8:28 is valid for two reasons. First and foremost, it says, for those who love the Lord, I have to be dedicated to God. I have to be willing to be submissive to his will, even if it means I spend a lot of time in prisons wondering what is going on. But the other part of it is, I have to be willing, like Joseph, to say, you know what? This person is after me. They have an evil intent. And unlike the world who says, ha ha ha, today's my day to get even. Today's the day of karma. I go, no, God, this is an Romans 8:28 day. What can I do to follow your will? Evil intent is throughout this world, but it is always going to be subjected. It will always be under the authority of Jesus Christ's love and his will. As Christians, my friends, we come together knowing that we have a God who can handle everything we face, including all the evil that is intended against us. So if you find yourself in a slow day and a bad day, and you find yourself in a prison cell going, I don't understand, cheer up. Joseph had those days, and you can see how it turned out for Joseph. Have faith, have trust in your God, because he truthfully can take care of all that you face. Thank you. Laura. We don't have